You have just witnessed an explosion created by firing an M28A2 high-energy anti-tank round into the fuel tank and passenger compartment of an armored personnel carrier. But it is what you didn't see that's important. There was no fire inside. For the past 7 years, the U.S. Marines and the U.S. Army have been testing and perfecting an automatic fire suppression system for the passenger and engine compartments of armored vehicles. The goal, a system that is reliable, sufficiently fast to snuff out a fire before any passengers are injured, yet responds to no false alarms. The tests under which the system has been evaluated duplicate a dreaded combat situation. A personnel carrier is under fire. An armor-piercing shell scores a hit in the area of the passenger compartment and ruptures a fuel tank. Fuel spews out and explodes. The system evaluated in the latest Marine tests employs newly developed fast-reacting components. It consists of 4 basic elements: an optical sensor, a control amplifier, pressure containers filled with a fire suppressant halon gas, and fast response solenoid-operated valves which release the halon. The eyes and brain of the system are the optical sensor and control amplifier. Both were developed by the Santa Barbara Research Center. When the automatic fire suppression system sensors and the halon bottles are mounted inside a personnel compartment, an explosion will be detected and suppressed so rapidly the crew would not even know there'd been an explosion. In Army and Marine tests, both M113 and LVT-P7 personnel carriers were used. Inside the passenger compartment, the fire suppression system was set up as it might be in a typical application. A sensor was mounted on the forward wall looking aft. To the left were mounted 2 bottles of halon. In the opposite corner was a 3rd bottle. Next to it, a high-speed instrumentation camera, peering in through a window, photographed what went on inside the compartment. Here, a new fuel tank is emplaced on the vehicle in preparation for a test. It is loaded with 100 gallons of fuel oil preheated to above 170 degrees Fahrenheit, its normal operating temperature. And here, to simulate the enemy's fire, a high-energy anti-tank projectile is mounted on the vehicle. It is aimed to penetrate the wall of the passenger compartment and puncture the fuel tank. Test ready, the area is cleared. The projectile is detonated. Let's see what the instrumentation camera photographed in a typical test. The film was shot at 5,000 frames per second. As projected, the action is slowed 200 times. The counter indicates the time in milliseconds from projectile penetration. Total time to fire out is 110 milliseconds, half the time it takes the human eye to blink. There was no fire. In the fraction of a second the fireball existed, not enough heat or pressure was generated to harm anyone. Let's look at that again, a frame at a time. The first frame shows the projectile's supervelocity jet emerging from the ruptured fuel tank. About 3 milliseconds after penetration, fuel combustion starts. An instant later, the sensor has triggered the solenoid valves and they release the halon. Before the fireball can reach a dangerous size or energy level, it is engulfed. The few subsequent sparks as oxygen leaks in are of no consequence. Here's the film in real time. Don't blink. Here it is again. And again. To get a better feel for the potential tactical effectiveness of the system, let's watch a test entirely from outside the vehicle. As the charge detonates, the fuel burns explosively, but only on the outside. The light gray smoke emerging from every seam in the vehicle is halon. A halon concentration of greater than 5% is necessary for the suppression of an explosion. Keeping the concentration between 5 and 7% allows personnel in the compartment about 5 minutes before fresh air is required. A concentration of 7 to 10% allows about 1 minute of exposure time. The system is designed for a nominal concentration of approximately 6.5%. In a tactical situation, if still mobile, the vehicle would simply leave the exterior fire behind. In any case, the crew could stay in the compartment for up to 5 minutes before needing fresh air. Here, dripping out of the bottom of the vehicle is fuel that entered the passenger compartment but never ignited. In over 120 such explosive tests, not once has there been an explosion that was not suppressed. Besides having the speed and sensitivity to forestall explosions, the new sensor and control amplifier solve a critical problem that has plagued all systems to date: false alarms. Just as it has never missed an explosion, the system has never triggered a false alarm. Earlier sensors, while adequate in other respects, could often be fooled into action. They could be triggered by a flash of sunlight, triggered by the flare of a match, triggered by sudden exposure to radiation from an electric heater. The new sensor provided by Santa Barbara Research Center solves the problem of false alarms through dual spectrum operation. The sensor has 2 infrared detectors. One is sensitive to the portion of the spectrum between 0.8 and 1 micron. The other to the portion between 7 and 30 microns. When the sensor is exposed to a flash of light, such as that from the sun, only the first detector produces an output. On the other hand, when suddenly exposed to far infrared radiation, such as that from a heater, only the second detector produces an output. The outputs of the 2 detectors are applied as inputs to a logic circuit in the control amplifier. It imposes 2 requirements. First, signals must be received from both the light detector and the heat detector. Second, both signals must exceed pre-established threshold values. Then, and only then, will the logic circuit produce the trigger that releases the halon. A flash of sunlight cannot trigger the gas. Not enough signal from the heat detector. The flare of a match cannot trigger the sensor. Not enough signal from either detector. A heater cannot trigger the sensor. Not enough signal in the light channel. The thresholds of the logic circuit have been set so that a trigger will be produced only if the sensor is suddenly exposed to light and heat at least as great as it would receive from a fireball 1.5 feet in diameter, 5 feet away. Smaller fires, the military considers, can be suppressed manually. The fire suppression system has been thoroughly qualified by extensive field tests. It has been operated for over 140,000 unit miles in a wide range of environments. In these tests, the sensors have been installed in both engine and personnel compartments. Ambient temperature extremes have ranged from minus 70 degrees Fahrenheit to plus 340 degrees Fahrenheit. In addition to the Army's XM-1, built by the Chrysler Corporation, the fire suppression system has been extensively tested in the Marine Corps' LVTP-7 amphibious personnel carrier and the Army's M113 personnel carrier. Just as there have been no explosions not suppressed, there have been no false alarms. in spite of the rugged test conditions, including severe physical shocks and vibration. In conclusion, the fire suppression system we've seen in action is militarily qualified, simple, rugged, and reliable. It does not react to false alarms. Yet when an explosion occurs, it extinguishes the fire in half the time it takes the human eye to blink. The system is flexible. It can be configured for various military applications. Boats, amphibian vehicles, aircraft, ground vehicles. In any confined area where there is the danger of a combustible fluid exploding, the automatic fire suppressant system has a tremendous life-saving potential.